Hello, Jeff. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Andrew. How are you?
It's almost the end of the semester here at Middlebury College. Another semester flew by. How has your academic year been?
It did fly by. There's no doubt about that. And I have an interesting perspective on this because there's a few new faculty in my department, and I'm also teaching a first year seminar this semester. So that's kind of two different groups that are both experiencing the uniqueness of a Middlebury semester more or less for the first time. And their universal question is, wow, does it always go this fast? And my answer, both for this, disparate groups, these new students and my junior colleagues, is yes. It's always kind of a wild ride, even if in the moment, maybe in the early part of the semester, you don't think it'll be over anytime soon, but it goes quick.
And here we are. And you're at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same time rounding out the corner of year two of the NSF 5-year funded Dust2 cluster, part of the Critical Zone network, of which I have learned a great deal over the past couple of years, in no small part due to our conversations. How has year two been for Dust2?
It's been great, and I will just offer the slight rephrasing that one could argue with a glance at the calendar that we're rounding out year two, but in my mind, well, technically year two of our project will go through the end of the summer. And for a project with such a robust field component, not just my element, but nearly everything, I know that this second summer is going to play an outsized role in how year two goes. So
What
I don't
is
feel
the
like we're almost
anniversary?
done.
What is the date? What is the
Well,
day? I guess it would be the date with the funding.
technically it started September 1 of 2020. So yeah, in my head, we started with an academic year and ended with a summer. So we are, I don't mean to overemphasize my correction. We are certainly in year two and we're more than halfway through. But I and many of my colleagues, I think, are quite excited about the upcoming summer field season and feel like year two won't be complete without that.
That's great to keep in mind as I do the work that I do. And is this here at the end of April, or just in the third week of April, just a couple of weeks from now? We'll be gathering together, and I am very fortunate to have travel to join you, supported both by Middlebury and NSF, to come and hang out with the Dust Cluster in Salt Lake City, sort of one of the core places that some of this work is going on. Are you calling this a conference? Is it a gathering? Is it a all hands meeting? How would you
Well,
characterize it?
I've been referring to it as the workshop for, yeah, lack of a better or more creative term, and also to signal that I'm hoping we'll get some work done while we're there, because it's in my mind, it's not simply intended to be an exercise to share results and ask a couple questions. It's really supposed to be quite a bit more than that. And this goes back to our original proposal that we wrote in the fall of 2019. We proposed to the NSF that part of what we would do to expand our Dust2 project, although it wasn't yet known by that name at that time, what we would do to kind of expand our project beyond just the core group of PIs that were involved in authoring the proposal was that we would have this workshop where we would bring together dust researchers known to us and unknown to us, people that we knew of but didn't know personally, to spend a couple days sharing information about what we're doing with Dust2, but equally, if not more important, talk about new collaborations, new directions in which things could go, both connected with Dust2 or parallel to Dust2, kind of wide open, really. But we want to expand the impact of our project beyond just those of us that were fortunate enough to receive the direct funding from NSF to roll our sleeves up and dive into this for 5 years.
If this is the first time that people are watching one of our conversations, first off, there's many more that you can binge and you can really enjoy it, like the latest Netflix series. Dust2 is part of the Critical Zone network. There are 9 clusters studying various elements of the critical zone. The critical zone is the thin layer of the Earth's surface which supports human life. I believe that's one of the ways that you have described it.
Yes.
Very complex internet-connected network of systems to describe, and that's one of the difficulties is how do you wrap it up very quickly.
Yes.
So the Dust2 cluster is examining source to sink mineral dust movement across the critical zone in order to better understand what development or the climate crisis could, throw more dust into the air or mean more dust is moving around. Not necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily a good thing, just trying to figure out what it means to help inform future policymakers if they're considering regulating and allowing a construction of a road or a building, or if mysterious chemicals start showing up in gardens or in other agricultural products where they came from. And it's a very, very exciting project. How has it been? You've presented about it already at AGU, you've presented it at EGU, you've been presenting and talking about it. Is this workshop bringing all that together and reflecting and then sort of relaunching, or is it let's check all what we've done so far, make sure we're doing what we're getting paid to do?
Yeah, it's a balancing act between kind of a bit of retrospection, but also the launching into the future. If I had to divide it out, I guess my hopes for the workshop are that it'll be, at least if not more than half forward looking, trying to catalyze some new things. We are, as we already covered, well into the second year of a 5-year project at this point. Many of the presentations that I've made that you just alluded to were intended to get the word out, to put this Dust2 project on people's radar, so that when we got around to running this collaboration workshop, we wouldn't be coming to people out of the blue. That people would already say, "Oh, I've heard of this," or "I've heard about this project. Yes, this sounds like something I'd be interested in connecting with." So, in my mind, we're sort of turning that corner, albeit not all at once and not without the opportunity to continue to look back around the corner.
The pandemic has changed. You had no idea when you were writing the proposal in 2019, all of the things that were going to be happening in 2020, from equity and inclusion in the geosciences really coming to the fore, or travel and field restrictions that the COVID protocols have made necessary. Has
Yes.
it hurt the project or sort of helped collaborative happen online?
It's a mix of both, to be ambiguous in my response. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always easy, that's for sure. Although receiving the announcement that we were selected for funding and that we had permission to launch this project was certainly a big silver lining in the middle of that first COVID year, even if it was followed immediately by the question, how are we going to do this in the midst of COVID? On the one hand, I think it's remarkable that I and the other principal investigators on the project, we still have not had a single moment where we have all 6 of us been present physically in the same room together. Even in our early meetings, laying out what the proposal might look like, they had a virtual component because people were traveling and on sabbatical and so on. That's not what I think any of us envisioned, for instance. But at the same point, as not just this project, but nearly all of us, across the board have learned. We've learned to make do. We've learned to be maybe more effective than we previously were with different ways of meeting and collaborating. So none of that has never thought that we didn't need to run a workshop with a physical presence. It's not like we've been getting by so well. But at the same point, yeah, here we are in towards the end of the second year, and it'll be the first time even that the lead PIs are all together in the same room. So you can imagine how excited we all are about this.
I am trying to imagine it. That was my next question. How do you balance the planning with just the anticipation of seeing your peers, your partners, your
Yeah,
collaborators?
yeah, it's
How
a
do you, I
it's a
guess
fun
the real question,
exercise.
the real question is, how do you not just make it all social and
Ah.
stick with someone?
Well, the beauty is that at least I, of the type of person that thinks that sharing research results and talking about common interests and brainstorming directions for the future, um, that doesn't feel like work. I think that a bunch of people who get together for the weekend and have some variation on that same mindset will be able to get a lot done and still have time for the social, getting to know one another. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I won't lie. I'm looking forward to it. And with the pandemic, we certainly needed to replan, reschedule. Originally, we thought, for instance, this would be a fall workshop, and here we are. We're going to do it in the spring. Um, Earlier this calendar year, I'll admit to moments of darkness where I asked my colleagues, honestly, do you think we should just cancel this whole thing? And they said no, and they pulled me out of my despair. And here we are heading toward the third week of April, when I think it's a reasonable thing to consider getting together. And maybe we'll end up being in a nice little window where there's such a thing where it's possible, but uh, I fully expect it's going to catalyze a whole new level of engagement in the project and bring in a lot of new faces too, which is wonderful.
I'm going to ask you a Middlebury specific question here. You're bringing one undergraduate, a couple more students with you. Who from your lab and your classes are you bringing and have you invited and will be included in the workshop?
Yeah, so one of my Middlebury students, Elsa Soderstrom, is coming with me. You had a chance to talk with Elsa once, and we were in the field together last fall and had a reasonably solid signal and could call you, which was remarkable. And this will be great for Elsa because she can present a small, poster presentation about her thesis research. But she's told me many times how excited she is to see firsthand how her piece of this fits in with my larger research and how my research fits in with my colleagues, and so on. It's a shell game, right? It's all of these nested projects, collaborative projects. The flow chart looks like a bunch of arrows. It's and I think that's a great mindset for her to have as she gets ready to head out there. And there'll be a number of other students there. About a third of our invite list is students from undergrad all the way up through advanced graduate students. And I think this is going to be an awesome opportunity for them and for us to learn what they're doing.
I have two questions. I'll ask this one first before I forget it, and then say the other one. I'm going to ask a personal thing to you to cast your mind back to one of your early appearances as a student to present some of your work, and the anxiety that you may have felt, or the confidence that you needed to bring in. What is it like for an undergraduate geoscience student to suddenly be surrounded by the experts and names that they've seen and read, and then tell us about your work? What's that pressure like on you?
Well, I think a lot of things happen simultaneously. And I mean, I really can only speak from my own experience, but I can generalize a bit from having been with many other dozens of undergraduates as they've done this themselves for the first time. It's scary, but it's also reassuring, rapidly reassuring, in the sense that you quickly realize that in some small way you're the expert about your project, and science is a enterprise that respects authority. And even the biggest name in the field who drops by your undergraduate poster probably knows less about your project than you do. And you tell them about your project, and more often than not, you'll receive some reassuring, confidence building feedback, and you'll emerge in the experience thinking, wow, that was really cool. um, that's a thumbnail sketch. Makes it sound really easy. I have admitted before, I can still remember standing next to my very first poster presentation and seeing coming down the aisle toward me a gentleman wearing the name tag that I recognized as someone that I had cited again and again and again in my written thesis, and thought, oh my God, here comes this person. And we had the most lovely conversation. And when it was done, he told me that I was doing great work, and I thought, I couldn't believe that really just happened. Right. So it's ideally it's that way for the majority of students, even if they're perhaps understandably anxious in advance.
The second question is, a big part of the project was this opportunity for Middlebury students or students working with other PIs
Yes.
to maybe go to other labs, to interact with some early career researchers or graduate students. That also has been sort of put on hold. Are you excited to see that part of the Dust Squared project start to bloom?
Yes, absolutely. It's that has probably been the part which has been held back the most by the pandemic in obvious and necessary ways. It just really hasn't been possible to put one of my students on a plane and send them out to, hang out in one of my colleagues' labs. Recently that might have worked, but for much of the past year and a half, you could imagine a lot of reasons why that would be unwise. So looking forward, I certainly hope that we're getting into a better situation with regards to that. We've got the summer field season coming. Outside's better than inside in general, as we've learned, right? And I think this conference, where we're going to bring together again a lot of students at various levels, is going to start to make those connections, which will make it seem even more desirable for a student to say, I really enjoyed meeting these people from that lab. Can I go there? Or, conversely, you met these people from that lab. Would you like to go there? Yeah. So I'm excited about that. On the other hand, it's not as though we're starting from a dead stop. I know that my colleagues in Utah, who are just physically in closer proximity to one another, have had opportunities to exchange students or interact with each other's students to a point, and that's been quite successful. And Elsa and I did travel to the University of Wisconsin in February to do some lab work there, which was part of the project, and that was an awesome experience as well. So baby steps. But next time we talk, before the summer or during the summer, I'd love to be able to tell you more concretely about how fully fleshed out that part of our project has become.
I'm going to ask you about the workshop again in just a moment, but I do want to touch on it's I don't want to ask specifically about policy or legal things that are going on, but there is some controversy about Salt Lake and the Great Salt Lake, and some things and some environmental issues that are happening out there in Utah, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yes.
And some of the work that the Dust2 cluster and the other clusters are doing is to help inform some of these policymakers and educate legislators, community leaders, community activists. How important of the project is that to you? This idea that we want you to understand the place that you're governing a little bit better so you can make more informed decisions.
Yeah, a great question. Honestly, I think it's hugely important. A project of this scale, a project with, this many years, a project with this many um, participants, the end goal here can't simply be the generation of new knowledge and writing of some papers that other dust influenced or dust interested specialists would read. The what NSF would call the broader impacts are a really big part of what we're after here. And there's a bit of a lag. You can't really have the broad societal impact until you have the science. But it's moving in that direction. It's been a lot of fun, for instance, in the last few months, going back to the beginning of 2022, some of my colleagues on the project who are based in Utah were able to participate in events with the legislatures at the Capitol, or have been interviewed again and again, or participated on panels for the media to just try to begin delivering or trickling out some of our early results into situations where they could justifiably be used to lead to better management strategies. So it's a big part of things. That'll be part of what we'll talk about at the workshop as well. And I could imagine that as we move into year 3, year 4, year 5, even the years after Dust2 is officially sunsetted, we're going to see more and more of that impact, that outreach being realized.
The workshop is 2 days. Do you already have an agenda in your mind of what's going to be going on?
More
Are there
than
tracks?
agenda.
Am I going to have to
Yeah.
choose a track between two things like that, or?
We had conversations about that, to be honest. For instance, even as simple as, okay, we want to spend an hour or two in this time block saying, hey, people who are interested in blank, go to that room. People who are interested in this topic, stay in this corner. We've shied away from that, to be honest. We're thinking all hands on deck, to use your lingo from earlier. And so even our conversations, our planning efforts, we're hoping will be, big floor style, where we will have everybody there, and we won't be asking people to make possibly difficult decisions about what they want to do from 10 to 12 on Friday morning at the conference. This one track, one track to rule them all.
You
Yes.
get your you get your coffee, you get your bagel, you sit down, and you're good. I'm so looking forward to sharing from it, to connecting with names that I recognize and work that
Yeah.
I've been seeing. So excited over the past couple of years, and really signal boosting some of their work. Are you, so the Popular Science article that just came out, are you just going to have stacks of that all around? People going to be signing and autographing that? It's just going to be a big
I
display.
didn't think of that, right? An autograph table. No, I wasn't thinking about that.
No, you got that's fair. That's fair. The
Yeah.
last question I have for you today is, you just mentioned that Dust2 goes year 2 gets to the end of August, year 3 September through August, year 4, year 5. Is there going to be a Dust2 that you're already cooking around for the next
It's
round?
so funny to hear you ask that, because I was typing something this morning and I hit the wrong key and I wrote Dust2. And in the back of my head, I was like, what was that? The future, or just a mistake? Um, only time will tell. Way too early to know. It's such a luxury to have a 5-year project. It's just remarkable to have, upfront a 5-year commitment from NSF for this and the other critical zone projects that were funded in 2020. So yeah, it's tempting to look far ahead, but there's a lot going on in the now and the immediate future.
That reads like the end of almost every abstract I've ever read. More research is necessary to determine.
Well, if that's how we end, you heard it here first, right? But hopefully we can be a little more definitive after 5 years, or at least have better questions.
Thank you, Jeff, for the invitation, for inviting me to be included and attend. I'm so looking forward to seeing you, like, really in your element, and connecting with some of the other members of the cluster and sharing about that work. I'll post this video in the cluster's Twitter, and then in a couple of weeks we'll be there.
Super, Andrew. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
I'm going to end the recording now, but we'll still hang out for
Sure.
a moment.